All right, so we have King 7 of diamonds here. Given this kid's button, like I don't think he's gonna play any hands, but he might actually play 1 versus me. So if he 3-bets, we're probably gonna find the 4-bet here. We're actually gonna try to induce it by like raising a little bit smaller than usual.
35 is that?
I'm gonna 3-bet this hand. I think Chin's gonna behave himself after I knocked his clock in the last one. My hand's got some good equity-driven qualities, and I think I'm gonna be able to do enough of what I would need to do to make it plus EV post-flop just by betting on good pattern boards.
275 is the bet.
I think Chin might be sizing down because it's my big blind and he wants to play pots in position against me. I'm glad he's getting 3-bet.
These sizings are just like kind of throwing me off, to be honest with you. I don't know what they mean at all, but it's just no way he has all these hands every single time I have a blocker. So we're just gonna put in the 4-bet again, and we're just gonna play pretty high volatile poker here. So he made it 275. We're gonna go 680-ish. This is so weird. His sizing kind of cages, I'm not gonna lie. All right, so we're gonna go 700 and then fold, which is so fucking annoying.
725.
I think it would be a pretty unconventional spot for him to put a 4-bet bluff in. To stay consistent with my read before I 3-bet, I think I just have to fold. It is pretty interesting though that he has shown that he's capable of just waking up aggressive after being, after having his hand caught in the cookie jar. He got stacked on that 4-bet bluff versus me, and then the very next hand he was in there cold 4-betting, and he folded that to Berkey's 5-bet. So I think it could just be a product of potential tilt, but I don't really like going back on my initial assumption because it's kind of dangerous to just declare him on tilt. So then I'm just gonna fold.
All right, we got one through. So that definitely means that he's taking like some weird sizing. I'm interested to see how he's constructing those kind of situations. But I really like what he's doing, to be honest. Like, he's forcing me to like put in a lot of risk to pull those plays off. But I just I had to kind of follow through where like we did open a 35 to induce, and he did pick that size, and we did have the king diamond blocker there. So we're just gonna have to go for it. Like, you know, these guys are tough, so we have to pull those triggers.
There are a lot of situations where, you know, I get dealt a hand and it's an open. Well, why is it an open?
Knowing that you're gonna have to not just speak your thoughts out loud, but in a way that makes sense to somebody watching and is relatively justifiable. I'm gonna have to be okay with saying something out loud and then retracting it immediately.
We're flawed, right? So like, we understand we made a mistake, but it's like nice to see that even someone very good, or that you perceive to be very good, still makes mistakes.
For a lot of players to just thoroughly explain their thought process in a certain situation, like in a vacuum with King Queen, well, it's like, you don't do that every time with King Queen.
It's particularly easy to talk about game flow, which is the forever unspoken about thing that's occurring. It's where announcers are most speculative, where they'll try to say, well, because this happened, I think Joey is thinking this now. And it's like, we've gone way off into a realm that you have no business really even talking to at this point.
Being able to see the dynamic that's being set up in the environment we were playing with the specific people we were playing with, that kind of shows you what goes into the adjustment process.
So we're all competitive, right? So if we lose a pot and 20 minutes go by, it's like, no, like I want to prove that I can hang too. So now it makes you a little bit eager. You start forcing a little bit. I mean, at least for me specifically, it did. And it's okay, like it's okay to acknowledge that.
I like fast-paced games. I like when decisions are rapid and there's a lot of chaos. But this environment's so much different because the focus isn't on the results and you're not in a hurry to play the next hand and try to win the next pot. Instead, the emphasis is on how good was your analysis.
I realize how hard it is to quantify your thought process in the middle of hands. And when you start to do that, it forces you to think about the game all the time. It's more draining, but you learn a lot more and it's pretty rewarding, I guess. Like, I learned a lot. I'd anticipate that both of these two to my left think I'm going to be raising very, very wide here on my button, which I will be relatively, but more so because Zach hasn't played any hands yet. I wouldn't be shocked to see Berkey 3-bet here.
50.
So normally in this spot, I'm calling 100%. I think because I've played so few hands, it's worth considering 3-betting, but I think this hand just plays so well as a call, but I'm definitely widening my 3-bet range based on game flow in the spot.
Call.
I'd anticipate this to be the best hand a pretty high percentage of the time, but I don't want to check back and allow my opponent to dictate the action for the rest of the hand. That goes for sizings, betting and not betting. There are a few good turns that I can barrel, like a jack and a king, and just betting this flop will provide myself a lot more clarity moving throughout this hand.
75 is the bet.
So this is about the sizing I'd expect from Jordan in this board texture. So I think my hand plays really well as a check raise. I pause before checking, considering donking, but I think this is just a good spot to check raise. He's gonna be c-betting a lot here. Likely, I think maybe a little bit too much. And this hand just plays great. I'm gonna have a lot of turns that I can barrel. I have spades, I have 8s and jacks. If I turn a 9 or a queen, I think I'm gonna feel reasonably confident about my hand. And I just think he is, the main reason I'm check raising here is I have a candidate that doesn't really play well as a check call, and I think he's c-betting too much. So now I'm gonna pick my sizing. I think roughly pot size is good, maybe a little bit bigger. So let's go with 285.
285.
I think this check raise is heavily weighted towards draws, specifically the nut flush draw. Could possibly be a pair plus flush draw, which would be top pair. But the hands that are made that beat me already are the sets, which there's only 9 combinations total of those. And I can, without a doubt, count 20 flush draw combinations that can check raise here. And it definitely helps that I don't block the ace or queen of diamonds here. I also think he has a lot of gut shot, backdoor spade draws. So I am going to call here with what I deem to be the best hand a high percentage of the time. I am going to kind of be a victim to the run out, but I have position, so I can utilize that in my favor as well.
So this is a pretty interesting card for my exact hand. I'm reasonably confident that I have the best hand most of the time, given how wide I think Jordan's going to be defending this. So now the question is, how does this hand get value against that range? He definitely has hands that are beating me. Very few 10x I think is 3-betting the flop, but I also think he has a lot of hands that he's planning on evaluating turn, maybe more as a float, also flush draws and hands with significant equity. I don't think he's playing 7-8 this way. I think this is actually an interesting spot to lead a little bit on the smaller side. So I continue to get value from floats, from draws, And I also, if he has 2 overcards and decides to fold those hands, I don't really mind that too much. So I think I'll probably go with a sizing a little bit under, also just because exploitatively, something I like to do where it just, I think, looks kind of fishy when you pick a size a little bit smaller than a check raise size. Not sure how much it's going to affect Jordan, but something I like to do generally speaking. So I'm going to go with 275 here, betting for value.
275 is the bet.
All right, 2 things here. I think that this card pairs a lot of his combo draws, and then it pairs his ace-9 of diamonds as well. A lot of other draws are also incentivized to barrel here. If he were to check raise, say, king, queen of spades, king, jack of spades, queen, jack of spades, all incentivized to bet here. The other thing I want to talk about is when it was on him, I was taking really deep breaths. That is to calm myself down, because if a non-diamond comes on the river, I'm planning to bluff shove over his bet.
Call.
Jordan definitely has some straights in his range. Not a lot, but some. I think definitely some of the hands that are 7x are betting the turn, are raising the turn. But I think he has definitely some of the 7x that he started the hand with raising the button that get to the river this way. But this is also a card where all the flush draws bricked, kind of the overcard floats that he might have and might peel for the good price on the turn bricked. He definitely just has way more combos that don't have showdown value here than value bets. So I think this is a really good spot with my very much a bluff catcher type hand that will not be able to get value for basically any sizing to check evaluate. And I think just given the line so far, it's going to be likely a check call, but we'll see what sizing he ends up using here.
As I pointed out on the flop, I was going to be a bit of a victim to this run out. The 9 makes a lot of 1 pairs for his draws that he check raised, and the 8 completes either the straight combinations that he check raised or now makes him 2 pair. I don't really see how I can win this pot unless he gave up with king queen or king jack of diamonds. He's got a bad run out.
So yeah, that's a hand that I thought would definitely be in his range, kind of the overcard floats. I think it's a very reasonable call on the turn, given the price he's getting, and made me feel good about the sizing. Maybe I'm being a little bit results oriented there. Probably a little surprised he didn't bet river with that exact hand, but I guess he thinks he has showdown value against some of my bluffs, so I think it's also a reasonable check back.
All right, so we have Jack-10 suited, and Nick's in the big blind. We do want to play pots against him. This is a tough left to get through, so we're actually going to size up a little bit here and just see what these guys do. I think they're probably less likely to 3-bet with this sizing.
55.
I know that earlier in the session I opened these exact 2 cards from this spot when it was folded to me, but I'm done doing positional opens with mediocre hands. It's my range for opening at this point with Berkey having this big of a stack on my left is that I am only going to be opening hands that I can defend against 3-bets with.
Just like that, we're rewarded. Okay, so generally I would say my hand functions as a 3-bet, but if you recall, my strategy here against Christian particularly is to flat all and give Nick a chance to squeeze. Nick's been a little bit less active and is on his phone currently, so I don't expect him to get too out of line, but being that Chin's kind of getting ran over right now, I would expect him to be a little bit more aggressive to my 3-bets. So I would have to size down to like 125, in which case I'd be looking to size down and then call a 4-bet, meaning would be playing post at about 1 SPR. Instead, I'm gonna keep stacks deep and apply a lot of post-flop pressure.
think I'd take a flop. Always going to be checking range, multi-way, out of position versus 2 opponents.
All right, guys. You know, you can't just walk the walk. I mean, whatever. You can't just talk the talk. You gotta walk the walk. And we have Jack 10 suited here, which is gonna barrel super well, blocks his best bluff catchers. So we're gonna start with a bet, and we're gonna see these guys on the river with 3 shells. So good luck, Matt Berkey. Good luck, Mr. Nick Howard. We're gonna start with a bet and see what happens here. So I'm gonna start with a half pot bet.
Okay. I flop through to a straight, through to a flush. I expect Christian is going to be barreling quite often on this board texture. So my plan is to obviously be calling here. I think my hand still possesses enough equity given my position. And I'm going to be raising any 2 barrels on the 10 of diamonds, the 8 of diamonds. I'll also be bluffing a turn 9. And I will be going call on any other improvements. So any other diamond, any offsuit 10, king, etc.
Call.
I got a decent backdoor nut flush, but with 2 players both putting money in the pot in front of me, I don't think my hand has enough playability here, especially with an ace high on board. My king doesn't play as active, so I'm out.
All right, let's fucking go. Setting up this 3 barrel. All right, so it's just a question about sizing here. And we're just gonna go 250 and then probably like 1,000 on the river. And unless it 4 straights, that would be really unfortunate. Berkey will have some ace X's here that will be forced to go call, but he also has like 9s, 8s, whatever. So we're just gonna kind of go for it and live with the results. It'll be unfortunate if he does call because it kind of changes the game flow and gives him more ammo, I guess, but whatever.
Okay.
5 is the bet.
This is a card that I expected him to continue on. And I expect he would have continued on most turn cards. Obviously, I have a clear fold here. His range that's set up to barrel is going to be a lot of backdoor equity hands, such as like what I currently possess. And this 4 really completes none of them. So he's pulling himself out on this turn, meaning he has a fair amount of ace X's in his range. And then he's probably turning some of his suited connectors into his 2 barrel bluffs, so say 5, 6, 6, 7. Nice hand by him, and we're rendered helpless.
You gotta walk the walk, boys and girls.
Sometimes it just fucking hurts. So Christian, I know a ton about. He is Berkey's protege.
You know, I've been mentoring him and coaching him for the better part of 4 years. I have very intimate knowledge of his game.
And he's just very sound, fundamentally, mechanically, but also knows where the exploits are.
I have Jordan, who's going to play a fair amount of hands, and then Matt Berkey, 2 to my left, and those are pretty much like the 2 people that I'm concerned about.
When he and I play in games together, for whatever reason, he gets the yips. Like, at a really crazy level, where he just starts doing things that are so outside of the realm of like what I know he's capable of doing.
I was in the middle of it, and so the dynamic I had with both of them was dictated by the dynamic that they had with each other.
So when you have 2 active players on your left that are going to be 3-betting and calling and like placing a lot of pressure and position, it's kind of annoying.
He knows what the right play is here, and for whatever reason, like, his brain can't marry it with his hand, and he just does something different. And I don't make it easy because, especially having position, I'm just going to do my damnedest to try to shit on him as much as I can the entire course of the game.
Theoretically, you should be playing less hands in that situation. I don't think I did that, to be honest.
He's not scared to pick out good bluff spots, and when he's winning, he's really tough.
All right, before I look at my hand, Berkey's hood as fuck. And I got nothing, side mount.
So this is a board that heavily favors the caller's ranges. They're going to be fairly loose play here, especially compared to the games that I'm used to playing in, given that this is shorter handed with more skilled players and we're deep stacked. But I think this is just a very clear kind of check give up despite having the backdoor flush draw, given how much equity my opponent's ranges have and how little I have in the spot.
Flop and bottom pair with backdoor flush draw and overcard. Multi-way, my playability is a little bit restricted. I do have positional playability over 2/3 of the players in the hand, but I think my hand just sort of falls smack dab in the middle of a checking range.
I'm open-ended here with some reverse implied odds. The 6 is a pretty nutty card. With 10 high against so much weakness from Zach checking and then Nick checking, I don't think I'm getting check raised here too often. I'm not sure that I have a double barrel, but I think I can buy the river by betting here at a high frequency, and I can take this pot down. Some of the time, I can see myself taking a bet check bet line here at some frequency also. But regardless, I think my hand definitely serves well as a bet on this street.
I'm really not sure what type of range Jack flats on the button. I think he's a decently capable player, and I think there's a lot of hands that could stab with equity-driven qualities. I think I'm just gonna call one and kind of read it as it comes to the turn. Definitely some cards I can pick up equity to that make my life easier, and yeah. It's definitely a better card for my range than Jack's. I also pick up a backdoor flush draw, which is helpful in terms of improving my bluff catching qualities. Again, I think my hand sort of falls in the middle of a checking range unless I want to play more of a creative leading range, which I think is a theoretically oriented option. But I don't really think it's all that necessary, especially since Jack's range is somewhat protected by 9x, although probably not as often as my range is. So I'm just going to play the more simplified option, I think, and check this hand.
So I'm pretty surprised that Nick didn't lead this card. I think it's much better for his check calling range than it is for my range. I think a lot of his hands that would take this line would benefit from leading the turn. Obviously, like, I have most Jack 10, and so he's gonna be facing a raise at some frequency. That being said, I do think he gets credit for playing bottom two this way, and so he's somewhat protected. I think I clearly don't have queens here. I think this is a tough card for me to get folds on, and so I'm just gonna check back and hope to realize as much of my equity as possible.
Turn check is something I expect often from Jack's range on account of the way my range is perceived, improving to that 9. I think he's going to be protected by a bunch of hands that are relatively showdown driven. Queen X was a big part of his range to stab the flop, but also is really congruent with his turn check. I'm improving this river, which makes things interesting because I really don't think Jack is protected by many 9x at all. I also think that straights get bet at a really high rate on the turn. So I think I'm in a really good spot to capitalize on a potentially crazy image that I've been cultivating through the psychotic Berkey shove and a bunch of other really aggro pre-flop moves that I've been pulling off. My game plan in spots like this versus showdown-driven range is to basically capitalize on the fact that guys are overly curious versus me, which I'm basically just trying to sort of level that. In Berkey's situation, I was making a raise versus what I perceived to be a polarized check raise, so I had fold equity. Here I'm just trying to maximize on whatever curious hands are in Jack's showdown-driven range. So I think I'm just looking at shoving for maybe a little over pot. Looks like I got about 900, maybe a little more. Just gonna stick it all in.
I have 10 high, I have to fold.
The type of spot where if he doesn't have anything, there's nothing he can do. And if he does have showdown value like a queen, I think that part of his range is relatively inelastic for any sizing. So I think it's a correct spot for me to size up to the max.